Right now, there's probably a spider somewhere in the room with you. Maybe under the couch, maybe in a corner you haven't looked at in months. And your gut reaction is almost certainly some version of fear, that specific full-body flinch that spiders trigger in a huge share of the population. Here's what's strange about that reaction. It's almost completely irrational. Out of roughly 50,000 known spider species on Earth, only about 1 in every 200 is actually capable of seriously harming a human being. So if humans have been living alongside spiders for the entire span of our existence, sharing caves, huts, fields, and beds with them, how did we survive it? And why does something so rarely dangerous still feel like one of the scariest things alive? The first answer is almost anticlimactic. Most of the time, ancient humans survived spider bites because there was barely anything to survive. Spider venom, across the vast majority of species, evolved for one very specific job. Killing insects, and insect physiology is nothing like ours. A dose of venom that can drop a cricket in seconds often does almost nothing to a creature thousands of times its size. Add to that the fact that most spider fangs simply aren't built to penetrate human skin with any real force. And you get the actual unglamorous truth about ancient human survival. For the overwhelming majority of encounters across tens of thousands of years, there was no battle to win. The spider bit, if it even managed to break skin at all, and the person felt a pinch, maybe some local swelling, and moved on with their day. But that can't be the whole story, because a small number of spiders really are dangerous, genuinely capable of killing an adult human, and humans have been running into those species for our entire existence too. So the second part of the answer is about numbers, and how thinly spread the real danger actually is. The species capable of seriously harming or killing a human are a tiny, specific list. Things like the Sydney funnel web in Australia, certain widow spiders found on almost every continent, and the recluse spiders of the Americas. Even among these, actual human deaths have historically been rare, not because the venom is weak, some of it is extraordinarily potent, but because the volume a spider injects is minuscule compared to what a much larger mammal can typically tolerate and metabolize. Ancient humans weren't surviving through medicine. They were surviving through basic biological math. Small creature, small venom dose, comparatively enormous target. Still, some bites clearly were dangerous, and this is where real observation, however crude, started to matter. Ancient and early modern communities living near genuinely lethal spiders developed practical folk knowledge fast because the stakes were real. In parts of the Mediterranean, southern Italian communities developed an entire cultural response to what they believed was a dangerous local spider bite, a phenomenon called tarantism. Villagers, mostly working women bitten while harvesting in the fields, would reportedly fall into lethargy, muscle spasms, and a trance-like state. And the prescribed cure was intense, frenzied dancing to a specific rhythm, now preserved as the tarantella, meant to physically sweat the poison back out of the body. Modern researchers have taken this apart carefully, and the science is genuinely interesting. The wolf spider, originally blamed for tarantism, has a bite that's uncomfortable but essentially harmless, never fatal. A more likely culprit is the European black widow, whose bite can cause real muscle spasms and vomiting, but which is rarely fatal in a healthy adult either. Many historians now believe tarantism was less about venom and more about something else entirely, a socially sanctioned outlet for exhausted, repressed field laborers, where the spider bite provided a culturally acceptable excuse to collapse, convulse, and dance out real physical and psychological distress. Either way, the point stands. The actual cure worked, or at least appeared to, mostly because the underlying bite was rarely lethal to begin with, and the ritual gave people something to survive toward. Other ancient remedies followed a similar pattern of misplaced confidence around a real problem. Theriac, an all-purpose remedy compounded across the ancient Mediterranean world, and used well into the 17th century, was prescribed for venomous bites of every kind: spider, scorpion, snake. Its actual ingredient list ran through dozens of components: herbs, spices, opium, even powdered viper flesh, and later, bizarrely, powdered mummy. There's no real evidence it neutralized venom in any meaningful biochemical sense. But because most bites people encountered, spider or otherwise, weren't actually lethal, patients treated with theriac recovered constantly, and each recovery reinforced belief in a remedy that was very likely doing almost nothing at all. Ancient medicine, in this specific case, was riding on a wave of survivorship that had very little to do with the treatment itself. The genuinely dangerous cases are exactly where this whole story flips, because until shockingly recently, humans had no real defense at all. Consider the Sydney funnel web spider, one of the most lethal spiders on the planet, capable of killing a healthy adult in as little as 15 minutes. Between 1927, when the first confirmed death was recorded, and 1981, 13 people died from its bite in and around Sydney. And there was genuinely nothing effective doctors could do for a severe envenomation. It took a toxicologist named Strawn Sutherland, working through 1980 to finally develop a working antivenom tested for the first time in a real emergency just weeks after his team finished it. Since that single breakthrough, there have been 0 recorded deaths from funnel web bites, despite dozens of people being bitten every year. That gap, 13 deaths across more than 5 decades versus 0 in the more than 4 decades since, is basically the entire story of ancient human spider survival compressed into one timeline. For the rare, genuinely lethal species, humans didn't have a real answer for most of history. We just got lucky, avoided them, or died, until modern immunology finally caught up. The same pattern shows up with the black widow, probably the most feared spider in the Americas. Before 1936, when the first black widow antivenom was developed in the United States, a bite from this spider could genuinely be dangerous, especially for children and the elderly, whose smaller body mass gave the venom far less to overwhelm. Most adults survived a widow bite even completely untreated, enduring a miserable day or two of muscle pain and cramping before recovering on their own, which is exactly the kind of outcome that let centuries of folk cures take credit for a recovery that was happening anyway. But for the more vulnerable, a widow bite really could be fatal, and there was nothing ancient remedies could actually do about it. It took until the mid-1940s for effective antivenom to even reach much of Latin America, arriving in Argentina only after a rural schoolteacher and a group of local volunteers spent 2 years hand-collecting 40,000 live black widows and mailing them to a medical school so researchers could finally synthesize a working treatment. Which brings us to the strangest part of this whole picture, the fear itself. Arachnophobia is one of the most common phobias on Earth, and by the raw numbers, it makes very little sense. Homo sapiens evolved in Africa, where dangerously venomous spider species are genuinely rare. So why would evolution wire in a fear of something our ancestors barely needed to fear? Researchers studying this puzzle have proposed a compelling answer. The fear was never really about spiders at all. It may be a case of mistaken identity, an evolved and entirely justified fear of scorpions, a close relative sharing a similar body plan that got broadly generalized to anything with too many legs and the wrong silhouette. Scorpions were common across the same regions where early humans evolved, and their sting is genuinely lethal, responsible for an estimated 2,600 deaths worldwide every year even today. In eye-tracking studies comparing people from Somaliland, closer to that ancestral environment, against people from the Czech Republic, both groups showed a measurably stronger attentional pull towards scorpions than towards spiders when shown both side by side. Exactly what you'd expect if the fear response evolved around one creature and simply spilled over onto its distant cousin. So here's the real picture, and it's a little humbling. Ancient humans didn't develop some clever secret trick for surviving venomous spiders. Mostly, they survived because the danger was wildly overstated by their own instincts. A fear on loan from a different, more dangerous animal entirely. Where real danger existed, in a handful of specific species, humans had no genuine answer for most of history, only luck, avoidance, and rituals that worked mainly because they didn't need to work very hard. The actual solution, a real antivenom capable of neutralizing a lethal bite, only arrived within living memory. Which means the flinch you feel the next time you spot a spider in the corner of a room isn't really about that spider at all. It's a warning system built for a completely different, much older threat, one your body never stopped listening for.